This is part 3 for chapter 17, and we will continue to talk about logos and then also talk about ethos and pathos and mythos. Okay, so think about arguments. Some people think of an argument as a, dispute between two people. But when we're talking about persuasion, we're defining an argument as a claim supported by evidence and reasoning for or against a claim. So, for example, if a student says the Latino Heritage Club should be given more funds next year, there's no argument because there's no evidence or reason supporting that claim. But to turn that statement into an argument, we would say, the Latino Heritage Club should be given more funds next year because it has doubled in size, and without an increase in funding, it can't provide its members the same number of programs. So the statement includes a claim supported by evidence and reasoning. So types of logical arguments. We have sign, example, analogy, and causation. So if you are going to make a logical argument and argue by sign, this is supporting a claim by citing information that signals that claim. Arguing by examples is where you provide one or more individual examples. So be careful, make sure that you have enough examples so that the listeners understand that they're not just isolated things that you picked. Are the examples typical? Are they representative of the problem? If you argue from analogy, that's where you support a claim with a comparable example that is similar to the subject of the claim. So you want to make sure that the subjects being compared, are they similar in every important way? Are there any ways in which the subjects are dissimilar? And is that important to the conclusion? Arguing from causation. This is where you support a claim by citing events that have occurred to bring about the claim. Now let's talk about reasoning fallacies. So a reasoning fallacy or a logical fallacy is a flaw in reasoning. And they're almost like tricks or illusions of thought. And they're often used by, sometimes by politicians and sometimes by the media to fool people. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of reasoning or logical fallacies, but these are 5 that the book mentions. So a hasty generalization is that everyone who breathes secondhand smoke will develop lung cancer. A false cause, where that's, for example, John tried cigarettes and he flunked out of school. Well, both of those might be true statements, but you've got the wrong reason. He flunked out of school could be for a million reasons, not because he tried smoking cigarettes. An either or fallacy would be something like, either we ban smoking indoors or kids will die. That's where you make an unreasonable comparison. Either we do this or something terrible will happen that may not be related at all. Okay, a straw man. An example here would be, if you support smoking indoors, you support killing kids. And the last one listed here, the ad hominem, is where this reasoning fallacy, it attacks the person or the person's personality that's making the argument rather than really the argument itself. So the example here would be, anyone who smokes is stupid and doesn't care about kids. Okay, I encourage you to go to the very bottom of the slide. The website is yourfallacy.is. And this is an interactive website where they list all of these different logical fallacies. And as I mentioned before, there are dozens, maybe hundreds, but these are some other ones in addition to the ones that the book has. Okay, let's talk about ethos. So, ethos is all about your credibility as a speaker, and basically based on three things: your competence, your character, and your charisma. So, you need to explain to the audience your competence. You need to explain that you have used good sources for your research. You make sure that you're using appropriate nonverbals to demonstrate your competence. You need to appear confident in when you're delivering your remarks. Now, your character, you need to try to garner goodwill from the audience. Be empathetic, and you have to be responsive to the audience. That shows your character. And then charisma, this is how you appeal to the audience. If you try to reduce the psychological distance from between the speaker and the audience, maybe you use that with a touching story at the beginning or using some humor, but that charisma comes through and speaks to your credibility. The textbook mentions three other terms that I think are important. When you begin speaking, you have initial credibility. I mean, you were asked to speak at this event, right? So you have some credibility just because you were invited to speak. So that's initial credibility. The hope is that by the end of your persuasive speech, when you have made, you know, good logical arguments or you've persuaded them with a lot of passion and emotion, that your terminal credibility or where you end up, that credibility is higher than when you started. Derived credibility refers to that you've gained credibility during this persuasive speech by making your arguments. Okay, pathos refers to emotional proof. Now, you can evoke negative emotions, things like fear and guilt and shame and anger and sadness. And these are very powerful. You can evoke negative emotions, and it can be a very, very powerful tool. Now, if you decide to evoke negative emotions, some things you need to be careful of. You need to really provide some graphic details, because if you're going after a negative emotion, you really have to grab them. You also want to always discuss the solution as well as the problem, because you want to offer your audience hope. You might emphasize the cost of not taking action, as well as the benefits of taking action. And make sure that what scares you also scares your audience. Another approach is to evoke positive emotions. So this is where you want them feeling happy. Uh, they're full of joy, or maybe it's pride. If you want someone to go out to vote, you talk about civic responsibility and the pride of being an American. Offer relief and talk about hope and show compassion. Now, mythos is using this approach can connect your message with your audience's social and cultural identity and give them a reason to listen to you. So one of the best ways to use mythos in persuasion is through storytelling. A lot of religions teach values through parables, for example. So mythos addresses faith, values, and traditions.